All right, welcome back to Beneath the Helmet. This is season 3. Super excited to have a very in-depth conversation about a topic that's honestly kind of very important to me and something that I'm very passionate about as well. So I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned podcaster, author, TRA provider, and coach. And I'm here to share a little nuggets with you today with our guest, which is Deputy Chief Scott Booth.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Scott Booth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. So tell our listener today a little bit about who Scott Booth is.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am a 35-year veteran of the fire service. I started volunteering my senior year in high school for all the wrong reasons. Someone raced out of a diner one night after a theater production. I thought, that's cool. And that's why I got interested in volunteering. And only once I got involved did I realize there was obviously so much more to it. Bounced around a bit. First career job was in Howard County, Maryland. I'd already been a paramedic for a few years and stayed in New Jersey. And then back in 97, I jumped coast to Gig Harbor Fire and Medic 1 in Washington State. And it's been one of the most rewarding moves and professions that I could have hoped for. Currently married to my wife, Amy, of 24 years. We have 2 kids together, Sheldon and Jordan, 23 and 30, respectively. They're both out of the house, and it is really nice to be an empty nester, if I'm being honest. We have 1 dog. Her name is Olive, and she has no problem being the only child. Now there's 4 hands that can pet her every single moment, and she takes advantage of all opportunities to remind us of that. I'm an avid cyclist, super important for my physical and behavioral health. Got involved in that when I was in, I don't know, probably grade school. And it's just been something that I've been really intentional about all my life. And I still play drums a little bit. It's kind of on a hiatus from that right now, but I'm looking forward to getting back on the drum kit and getting some of that nervous energy and some of my creativity out. So that's probably, I guess I should say professionally, I'm the Deputy Chief of Health and Safety for Gig Harbor Fire and Medic 1. And I'm also in charge of fire prevention and emergency preparedness. So it's been it's been a great spot. I've really enjoyed the last 2.5 years that I've been in this role, and looking forward to more to come.
Love it. What's your dog's name?
Olive.
Olive. And what kind of dog is it?
She's a Australian Labradoodle.
Oh, same. I got Murphy. He's a Labradoodle as well. Mini guy.
There you go.
Yeah, he's about 30 pounds. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's a medium. I think she's on the higher end of 30, but man, this is our first designer dog. and she is they have got such personality. Oh, yes. Super cool. Yeah. Really enjoying her and very smart.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I'm a dog lover for sure. So let's dive into something that's obviously very important to both of us. But you wrote a ECFO white paper. I guess it was your capstone project on this
Correct.
subject. And the subject is vulnerability in the fire service or in leadership in general. So tell us a little bit about why you chose that topic first for your capstone. Why was that so passionate to you to dive into that theme of a capstone?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we begin, I sometimes I sit back and I think that this topic is like so last decade, I'm just like, this is so old news. Nobody cares about this. And then there's other times where I think, man, there is nothing more important for us to discuss than the impact and importance of expressed vulnerability, especially for leaders. So why did I get interested in this? So I would say the long version of the story is that I was raised by women, my mom and my grandmother. My father left when I was 9 years old. And so I really didn't have a strong masculine role model, if you will, growing up. And really my mom worked full time. So my Nana was the one that really raised me, and such an amazing woman. She just showed me that it was okay, right? It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show emotion. It's okay for a man to express themselves, and there's no reason for there to be a facade. So fast forward, I start my working life, and certainly as a street medic in the state of New Jersey, I saw a ton of stuff, and there were opportunities to be vulnerable, to share sorrow with my partners, and that was all well received. So I got that positive reinforcement of a willingness to express emotion. I was in theater, which obviously is all about portraying an emotion, and so it just became a part of my person. Jump ahead to Howard County. I was going through a divorce from my first wife, trying to find my way, made some pretty significant mistakes, did some property damage when I was at work on probation. And there was a leader there who, his name was Dave O'Neill, and he showed me an amazing amount of grace. And instead of giving me the firm, "Hey, what the heck, kid? What do you think you're doing?" He took me out on the porch and we talked for like an hour. And he just asked me, "What's going on? How you doing? What can I do to support you?" It turns out while we were out on that porch, the crew went ahead and repaired the damage that I did. And I'm not talking just like an easy repair. It was like sheetrock and paint, and like they legitimately did all this while I was outside. And I came back in and they said, "Hey man, it's okay. We're going to tell the captain when he gets back, just so you know." And luckily the captain showed me the same amount of grace. But it just was that one more opportunity where vulnerability and humility was celebrated instead of criticized or chastised. All right, so now I jump coasts. I'm in Washington State. Things are very different in the Pacific Northwest versus the East Coast. I always say that I'm happy that I'm from the East Coast, but I'm 100% a Pacific Northwesterner. Things are just different here, in a good way, in a really good way. It's okay to have feelings and emotions. It's okay to express, relative weakness. All that stuff is a cultural norm, and that is 100% where my organization is at as well. Chief Dennis Stone is our chief for the last 4 years, and has really done a good job of shepherding that legacy forward that was created by our former fire chief, John Burgess. And I say that Chief Burgess was exactly what we needed at the time that he became our chief. We were in a bit of a cultural crisis, I guess is the best way to put it. And he was the leader that we needed to come forward and to lead us with humility and grace, and really help form what is a lasting culture of genuine love and respect. It's something that is celebrated. It's something that is reinforced and reminded in every time that Chief Stone speaks to the organization. Those are cultural norms that are reinforced and supported. When I went to EFO, one of the first one of the first things that we did as a group to kind of break the ice, the word's escaping me, doesn't matter. So we, yeah, thank you, an icebreaker. So we were each given a sheet of paper, off an easel, and we had to draw 4 quadrants. And the first quadrant was your childhood. The second quadrant was your high school years. The third quadrant was your professional life. And the fourth quadrant was what you kind of envisioned for your future. And it might have been specifically, what do you want to do when you retire? I don't remember, but it was basically the, future forward. And so I sat down with my piece of paper, and now keep in mind, this is the very first class of EFO. I don't know anyone else in the room. There's probably 30 of us. And so filling out high school, current and future, easy. I knew exactly what that was like. But when it came to childhood, I had a choice to make. And I chose to simply draw a face, like a little kid with a bunch of little pieces of hair, and it was crying. And it turns out I was at the left front corner of the room, and so I got to go first. And so I stood up and I referred to my piece of paper, and I just explained that I was really struggled with what to say, but my childhood wasn't great. I had an abusive alcoholic father. I was sexually abused shortly after that by my next, quote, father figure. And my childhood pretty much sucked. Did seventh grade twice. It was such a great year, but that's not why I did it twice. I really, really struggled in school and in life in general. And so all that to say, that morning, it took us all morning for everyone to go. And that morning was amazing. And the reason I say that is because people told me that it was because I led with vulnerability that they were willing to leave their vulnerability. They were just like, whoa, it's going to be like that? Oh, okay. And it was just, their instructors were raving about it. And they basically just said, you know what? You're supposed to start thinking about your now in EFO, you only write one large paper, as opposed to the legacy model where you did a paper per year. But it needs to be something that's an adaptive challenge, right? Something that you're changing the hearts and minds, not just writing a policy. And so one of the instructors said, I don't know what you're thinking about for your paper, but it probably should be around vulnerability. And that planted the seed. And then that only built year over, class after class, year over year, when I began to really wrap my head around how much this topic meant to me, how much I can look back on my career and how many experiences I've had where vulnerability has served me very well, and how few vulnerability has really bit me. And it just strengthened my resolve that this was something that was so important to me that I needed to share this. And I love that I get to share it on your show and to spread this message outside of my own fire department, my own EFO cohort. I want this to spread like wildfire, because I really think that people need to be talking about this. It transcends so many different things in our roles as public servants, leaders, followers, everything.
Love it. I love so many things you said there, especially around the kudos that you have for your previous chiefs that you had. We don't often hear positive things about our leadership sometimes, right? And it's nice to hear people talking nice things about their leadership, their previous chiefs. And so thanks for sharing that, because I'm sure that means a lot to both of those two. And then also that these instructors and your basically your whole class kind of acknowledged this and created that safety to speak up and share their stories. So kudos to you. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. That is certainly one of the lessons. I'm sure we'll get there, but being vulnerable isn't just about endearing yourself to the person that you're opening up to. It's far bigger than that. But I don't want to steal the plot. So let's just keep moving.
Sounds good. So I'm very curious. What would you say is the definition of vulnerability? Like how do you describe it?
Yeah, perfect. I'll just share with you the definition that I used to kind of frame the context of the paper, because at the end of the day, we didn't agree on anything. I agreed, but I had to present a singular definition, and this was provided to each of my interviewees, so that we had some context around what we were going to discuss when I started asking questions that were, more specific to vulnerability. So I pulled this out of a paper. It's called "Vulnerability in Leadership: The Power of Courage to Descend," and it's a paper out of 2018, conducted. It may not actually be a paper. Anyway, it was affiliated with Seattle Pacific University. I don't remember if it was a research paper or if it was like a doctoral dissertation or that kind of thing. But what I went with was a willingness to be transparent and emotionally exposed in a relationship with another individual, with the possibility of being hurt or attacked. And so that's how I framed up the conversations that ensued in my interviews. right? It's just opening yourself up, knowing, maybe depending on your culture, expecting to be hurt by it. That's what vulnerability really is. It's that uncertainty in the response to your words. And as I've already foreshadowed, I have very few examples where people have taken advantage of that. Far more examples where it's been honored and it's only made the relationship stronger.
I would agree. That's probably one of the biggest fears that I talk to a lot of leaders about vulnerability is that, "Oh, I'm just gonna, I'm putting myself out there. I'm just gonna get shot in the foot. I'm just, people are gonna walk all over me. People are gonna use me." From my knowledge, and sounds like from you, that's not necessarily the case all the time. Sure, that's gonna happen, but it's not the case all the time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's rarely the case. And I would say that if you're interacting with someone who does do that, that you really, it should show you or teach you something about that person's character. If someone is going to take advantage of your vulnerability and instead of honoring it and respecting it, they weaponize it, that can, I mean, at the end of the day, that interaction didn't go well, but I would argue that you learned a tremendous lesson and how you should move forward regarding whether you choose to trust or not trust that individual in the future. So there's something to be learned in that, regardless of which way it goes. But like you just said, I have found that it rarely goes that way.
There's always something to learn from every conversation, good or bad.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about vulnerability, is there a difference between authenticity and vulnerability? Do you think they're the same, or is there a difference there?
I would say that's a very interesting way to ask that question. I would say that vulnerability is probably within authenticity. I think you can be authentic to the people around you, but still be a little guarded. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to laser focus on vulnerability specifically. In other interactions I've had with folks, I've done one other podcast on this topic. I explained that vulnerability can be a lot of things. Vulnerability doesn't have to be disclosing your deepest, darkest secret, right? It doesn't have to be, as my example leading in my lead-in, it doesn't have to be me talking about being sexually abused. Like that's a pretty deep vulnerability for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be that. Vulnerability can honestly be as simple as saying that you don't know. Like you can start there. If there's anyone who's listening to this podcast who's like, man, I don't know, this vulnerability stuff's a little too frou-frou for me. I'm not sure I'm willing to give this to go. I'm afraid. I think it's stupid. I think it's whatever cliche ego thing you would say. I understand that and I respect that. But I would challenge everyone to look for even the simplest opportunity to try it on for size, right? I think we can all agree that when we are a member of a team, we are better than we are if we were by ourselves. If the people listening to this now are at my level where we're executive chief officers and we really don't have much of a team anymore, we're not on engine companies, we're not on medic units, we're not in the fire station every day in community with the people that we're working with. Yeah, it's a little harder for sure. But if you're a part of a team, I think we could all agree that the team, if you're doing it well, is better than the sum of its parts. And so if you can find an opportunity to acknowledge an area where you don't excel over some member of your team on something, that's how you can start expressing vulnerability. And I would be surprised if someone takes advantage of that and tries to turn on it and use it against you. That just hasn't been my experience. And maybe I've been lucky, but I still think it's worth giving it a try.
So for that leader who's listening right now, who's kind of on the fence, do I embrace vulnerability or do I just avoid it and protect myself? Is there things that leaders can look at today and start to utilize vulnerability in their life a little bit and test waters? Like you said, maybe it's the phrase, I don't know, but is there other little nuggets that could help that person who's never experienced vulnerability, how they could start doing that today?
Yeah. For me, vulnerability is so second nature. It's really just kind of my preferred approach. Everyone on my team knows that's who I am, and that's the way I'm going to approach situations. So it's hard for me to think of, certainly if I think back to my childhood, my youth, I was not a popular kid. I was definitely someone who was picked on relentlessly. And any little weakness, whether it was intentional or otherwise, was used against me. And I'm trying to think of when I would have expressed vulnerability for the first time and had a positive reaction to it. And it probably had to come in emergency services, right? It probably came from my volunteer fire company, where a bunch of us were all in the same place. A bunch of us were still trying to figure it out. And we really needed each other to be successful. That's probably where I first experienced some grace in weakness. I think the easiest way is just to recognize our own infallibility, to acknowledge that, none of us are perfect at everything. None of us. Doesn't matter what you are, who you do, what you're doing, what role you're in. None of us have everything 100% right. Never make a mistake. Like that's just not real. And if you convince yourself that that's what's required, give yourself some grace. Cut yourself some slack. But relying on the strength of your team is inherently showing vulnerability if you're a leader. That may not be true if you're a peer with everyone on the team, because there's no expectation out of the peer per se. But if you're the leader on a team, just relying on the people that you're working with to make the team successful is in and of itself an expression of vulnerability. And if you allow someone on the team to be more successful, quote unquote, whatever that means, than the leader, and you acknowledge it, you celebrate it, and you thank them for making the team successful, and in that maybe acknowledge that you couldn't have done it as well, or something simple like that. That is vulnerability, and that earns a lot of trust. That was kind of one of the overarching lessons, and there were several, but that expressing vulnerability builds trust. And we work in an environment, both on the fire ground, that's chaotic, dynamic, life or death, that inherently you have to be able to trust the people, the person on your left of you, the person on the right of you. But we also have a lot of kind of mundane, routine, almost domestic interactions with the people we're working with. And that requires a lot of trust too, unless it's just going to be very superficial and very, I don't want to say meaningless, but, you're in a relationship with these people. We're spending a third, a fourth, whatever metric you look at of our lives with these people. And I would hate to think that I would do a third of my life with people that I wasn't willing to get to know below the surface.
I love that.
Yep. Team is the foundation. Teamwork and trust. So for the listener who's once again, I think this vulnerability is a challenge for some people to embrace. So how the person who's listening right now and going, well, this is just going to erode my authority as a leader. If I keep passing the buck all the time, if I keep saying so-and-so is more knowledgeable than I am, or whatever that looks like, what would be a tip for that person who's kind of thinking that in their mind right now, that, hey, I'm going to lose my authority if I keep acting vulnerable in front of my crews?
Yeah. So one of the interesting outcomes, I feel like I should throw a little context around this just to kind of explain the group that I interviewed. Just to kind of, from my perspective, it helps legitimize what I'm talking about, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to turn this into a qualitative study. But so I interviewed 10 people from my department. My department is about 140 strong, and the majority were firefighters. There were 2 lieutenants, which is our company officer, and there's 1 battalion chief. Their experience range was pretty well evenly split. I had 2 with 5 or less years of experience, and that was just about equal all the way across, with the exception of I only had 1 person from 10 to 15 years, and I had 3 people with over 20 years of experience. So I feel like as far as their tenure is concerned, it was pretty evenly matched. The majority were male. There was 1 female who agreed to participate. And that's probably the most of it. As far as what the direct feedback from my interviews showed, while I think it's easy for a leader to contextualize that their authority is grounded in traditional masculine traits, that's not what my research suggests. Although there was a key difference. So yes, if you are constantly walking around, never having an opinion, always deferring to someone who's, quote, lesser, whatever that means, then yes, I think that at the end of the day, that could undermine your trust. But what I found was that vulnerability was celebrated off the fire ground and was a point of caution on the fire ground. And so if we let that settle just a little bit, what I found was that the more junior people, when they responded, they were more suspect of vulnerability because they felt that it eroded their trust in their leader on the fire ground. Where the more senior people saw vulnerability as an asset everywhere, didn't matter, just recognized that vulnerability was critical. The more time that they've spent, the wiser they become, the more experience they have, blah, 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 blah. And so I think what was interesting is that you need to be thoughtful about where you express vulnerability, right? I can't go run around every day and simply burst into tears every time I interact with somebody. That's not going to be effective. I will lose my credibility. But if I'm thoughtful about how I express vulnerability, where I express vulnerability, the context and the subject matter, then what the science shows, albeit 1 research study, but there were lots of research studies outside of the fire service that validated this point. It just improves your credibility. It actually endears people to not only a greater level of trust, but also when you do make a mistake, and you will, they're going to show you grace because you showed them grace, because you've shown that it's okay not to try to fake it and convince everyone that you got all the answers. It creates a more genuine level of trust and respect and admiration that I personally believe is critical for a close-knit, high-performing team.
That. So with all this being said, and it sounds like, most of the people that you talked to in your study embraced vulnerability. Why is it still sort of taboo? It's not norm. I think it should be norm. I think it should be, but why is it not? If everyone's embracing it so much, why is it not norm?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And you illustrate a key limitation of the study. I interviewed employees from 1 fire department in 1 area of the United States. I would love if I were independently funded to do this, to reproduce this study all over the country. I would love to see what the results were. My guess would be that they probably would skew the other direction, if I'm being honest. But why is that the case? Well, a lot of the other research studies pointed out, rightly so, that how do I want to say this? That vulnerability from men is not socially acceptable. It is not embraced. It is not celebrated. I don't want to get crazy political, but if you look at my country's current leadership, vulnerability is probably one of the biggest 4-letter words that anyone could say right now. It's not what It's not what that stereotypical masculine leader looks like. And frankly, it's a shame, because while it is possible to get, this is the way I've always said this, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I've always said, and many people have said it, I'm just going to repeat it, that it is easy to get people to do what you say because of your rank. It is harder, not impossible, not at all impossible, but it is much harder to get them to do what you say because they want to, regardless of your rank, right? And that's where vulnerability comes in. People will do what you say because you got the bugles. I mean, so what? Like, anyone can do that. That's personally, I'm not terribly impressed by that. But when I think back to the crews I've led, where vulnerability has been a big part of my leadership approach, they followed me, and I'm confident if you ask them, they would agree with this. Otherwise, I mean, many of them will listen to this, so at least I hope so. that they followed me because they wanted to, and whether that was because they didn't want to let me down, because they cared about me and respected me, and if it's what I needed done, they were in to do it. Whatever words they would put around it, it's that close, meaningful, trusting relationship that created the environment where we were going to die for each other. We loved each other, and we said it, and we meant it. And I don't know if a lot of teams can say that and feel that. I don't know if a lot of men are comfortable telling other men that they love them, but they should, because deep down they probably feel it. And if you feel it, why wouldn't you say it?
So for the listener right now, what would be one that poll question you really want to get out to, deeper than just your organization? What would be that question you want to ask that person? Is there one particular question to kind of hone out some of that vulnerability questionnaire in your mind?
One of the things that was a clear pattern that came out of the study was how much the people that I interviewed did not like being micromanaged. And when I got to really trying to understand the results, and was introspective of my own, really kind of thought about, okay, hang on, I was probably like that at one point too, where I felt that directing was not only what people wanted from me, but it was, my comfort zone was to just direct people. It got me thinking, okay, so if I were to ask a question of a leader who's reluctant, maybe who's uncertain about leaning into vulnerability with their teams, I think I would want to ask, why is micromanagement your preferred approach? Because from my perspective, that lies with the leader, not with the followers. Is it because you haven't trained them well enough to be able to independently make decisions? Is it because you lack self-confidence and you're afraid that they're going to outperform you? Is it because you aren't willing to let them shine? And if so, why? Like really think about and dig into what's the motivation behind your unwillingness to let them succeed, right? There's that saying that every good leader is working to make themselves obsolete, right? Every good leader it should be training and creating their own replacement. That requires vulnerability, right? Letting people on your team be successful and shine in their moment, that requires vulnerability. But man, how exhausting is it to try to keep all the people that you're leading down so that you can look like the superhero? Oh, I just can't even wrap my head around that. At least not at this point in my career. There was probably a point in time where I did feel that way. And if I were to think back, I would say that was largely based in my own lack of self-confidence. I didn't believe in myself enough to let someone else take the glory.
Do you think that's underlining in most people, is that confidence piece?
I would think so, because when I think of at least in my own organization, because I've been here 27 years, so I haven't experienced a lot of other leaders from other organizations and other cultures, but here, the people that are really, really good and dialed have no trouble letting the people around them be the stars, right? Because deep down, you know that you're part of the reason they're the star, right? It's because of the role modeling that you've done. It's because of the time and effort you've poured into their success and their abilities and their skills. It is largely because of you. But if you believe in yourself, you don't need anyone else to tell you it's because of you. You just inherently know it. Yeah, I guess that would be the question I would ask: is if there's someone listening to this who's like, man, that all sounds nice, but nah, I'm not there. That'll never work. That'll never work here. That'll never work for me. That'll never work, whatever. Take some time to really understand why you feel that way. Take stock. It could very well be that your culture would eat you alive. And I understand that. I'm not naive enough to think that just by clicking my heels together, this all works, right? I'm not that naive. But unless your culture will eat you alive, everyone should really be giving this a go, because you're going to create deeper relationships than you thought could exist with a coworker. You're going to experience a team dynamic that transcends the work we do. Man, it's just beautiful. I don't know how else to say it. It's just, I've had it a couple times and it is amazing. Frankly, I've got it right now with my executive team. We weren't like this when we first came together. It's taken quite a bit of effort and time on behalf of Chief Dillon to kind of educate us and role model for us. But man, we are one of those teams. And I've had several of them when I still work the field. And it's just amazing. And I really want the same thing for everybody else in the fire service who chooses to put themselves in a leadership role.
You feel your passion on this subject coming through the screen for sure. So you kind of touched on it briefly, but I want to kind of highlight this. What would change in people's lives if they became more vulnerable? You kind of just touched on a couple things there, but what would change in somebody's life?
Yeah, again, this is just my perspective, but I personally think that anxiety and stress is reduced. I think, the fire service, rightly so, is really focused on behavioral health, mental health. I would say over the last 5 to 7 years, it's really become one of those high-level priorities for us as a profession to lean into this. It's certainly true with law enforcement, military, basically all public service. And if you are able to have closer, more meaningful relationships with the people you're working with, that is going to serve your mental health. We know that isolation, I always joke that isolation is one of the most effective forms of punishment. You think solitary confinement, what that does to people. If you're in close relationship with others, that is the opposite of isolation. And so I think it helps all of us have a more, I don't want to say well-adjusted, that sounds wrong, but a more healthy, holistic approach to behavioral health. We've got people that we can lean on. We got people that we can share frustrations with. If we experience a challenging situation, whether it's in our personal life, divorce, financial problems, aging parents, whatever, whether it's on an incident scene, kids, whatever is your thing, and it's different for everybody. If you have someone who's close by, who gets you, who understands you, who can relate to the way that you're experiencing it, and you can share in that, and they can validate your feelings and let you know that, yeah, you're not alone in this, that is I mean, everything that we're investing in peer support, ongoing behavioral health, whether it's, whether it's embedded counselors or relationships or inpatient treatment, and inpatient treatment only happens when you don't address this early on. All that stuff is really about just that close personal understanding relationship. There's nothing that's rocket science about any of this. It's just creating the environment sometimes where it doesn't exist to create that situation. So it'll ease your stress and anxiety. It'll create a more balanced personal mental health. It will, I have found that it creates more cohesiveness on the team. You're able to better anticipate each other because you know each other better. You're able to, there were a couple points that were made in my research that talked about if you show up to work and you're just at 70%, you're having a bad day, right? This ancient notion that you check all your personal stuff at the door when you come to work and you're just professional, and then you kind of re-engage. Yeah, whatever. Like, whoever thought that was real, it's just ridiculous. So you show up to work and you're struggling with your personal life. That's what happened when I did that property damage back in Maryland. If people understand you and know what you're dealing with, then everything is clearer. It's like having vision problems and being able to put on a pair of glasses, and you can just see things so much more clearly when you understand what it is you're looking at. So you're able to show grace to each other. You're able to receive grace. You're able to show grace. There's no risk in showing grace. There's no risk in receiving grace. It's just, I would say that it's just a much more healthy approach, and the confidence that you get knowing that you can rely on the people around you, that they're not going to take advantage of you, that they're going to help when you can't fill a task or requirement, or whether you're having that bad day and you need a little help shoring yourself up to be 100%. It just feels good. And it's so much more effective in the way that you serve our customers. So
love it. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of being authentic and vulnerable with people, and it's something I've learned in the last handful of years. I always had my cards very close to my chest. As a leader, I felt like I was doing some things very authentically, but also guarded at the same time, right? So I've learned over the years, and I'm sure it contributed to my own personal burnout as well, right? So, and it's interesting you bring up lonely and isolated as a key factor, because you think about most chief officers, it's a bit of a lonely spot to live in, right? So if you can work towards reducing that loneliness or isolation as a chief officer, your career is going to be much healthier and hopefully longer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That has become an emphasis in my own small circle, right? Western Washington, the three big counties are Snohomish, King, and Pierce. I'm in Pierce County, and that has become something that we are beginning to talk more and more about, because we've created the systems, the processes in place to support the rank and file. But the lone leader is somewhat of an afterthought, right? And whether it's based on the fact that they've got the most experience and so they've got the most tools, or whatever, who knows why people just kind of forget the chief. That's a challenging spot. And arguably, Chief Doan has even said this, someone who's very, very supportive of vulnerability. It's in everything he talks about. He openly models that behavior to anybody. It's not just the people closest to him. It's top to bottom. He even points out that as the fire chief, there's times where he's not comfortable being vulnerable with even someone at my rank, just one bugle below him. And so for the fire chiefs, you need to find people that are at your same level that you're comfortable opening up to. And then well, you need to lean into that. You need to really just take advantage of the times that you do get to spend together, where you do get to be vulnerable with someone who is truly your peer. I believe Chief Doan views his command staff largely as his first team. I know that we're his first team. We work on it constantly. But he does admit that there's times where, as the 5 vehicle chief, he's still even a little concerned about expressing vulnerability to us. And boy, that's a tough spot, right? I've got 3 or 4 other people that I can be vulnerable with, who are at my same rank. But again, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable to anybody. But the point being, right, if I were guarded, I've got a couple people I can talk to, but he's got nobody internally. So it's a tough spot for the fire chief. Fire chiefs need to be very intentional about, a lot of women say that it's their tribe, whatever you want to call it. Call it a tribe, call it call it a book group, call it whatever you want. You need people that you can open up to, and share the real stuff, because it matters. Because keeping that inside is challenging.
100%. And that's what most of my clients through coaching is fire chiefs, because they have that one person, me, being extremely confidential, because I'm not even in the same country or same province or anything like that, same town for sure. And they can just be open, honest, authentic, with no strings attached, right? And that is their one person they can do that to as a coach, right? So I'd love
Yeah,
to,
love that.
yeah, I'd love to dive back to the paper that you wrote. Was there anything that really surprised you, like caught you off guard? It's like, wow, I was not expecting this result from this paper.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by the way the junior members viewed vulnerability. That they were concerned that expressing vulnerability implied a lack of confidence on the fire ground. That one caught me a little off guard. But once I heard it enough, it was like, all right, well, regardless of whether I expected it or not, it is true. The other thing that I was surprised by in a good way, was the powerful nature of shared struggle. There were several people that talked about, and there were several contexts. It was, a really challenging project, or a really dynamic drill on the fire ground, or obviously in combat, fighting a fire. That type of thing really served to strengthen the team. And the reason why that was so impactful to me is we're not necessarily a small fire department, but as far as the number of working incidents we run, it's a low number. Statistically, we'll run on average 1 fire a month. And I would just call that a working incident. It doesn't need to be a full-blown, second alarm fire. I'm just talking about anything that brings multiple units to the scene, requires incident command, yada, yada, yada. And so that's a pretty small number. And that is largely due to the emphasis we put on prevention over the years. That's largely due to the fact that our community is generally speaking pretty well educated, generally speaking, a higher socioeconomic. And so that creates a challenge for a leader. And what it showed me, and what I challenged our leaders to do, was, instead of kind of sitting back and waiting for shared struggle to just happen organically, that you need to be intentional about creating shared struggle. And it doesn't have to be hitting the drill ground every day. It doesn't have to be, doing 2-a-days or night drills, or really pushing your crew just so that you can struggle together. It can be anything. It can be, like I said, it can be a hard project. It can be maybe someone's got an idea and you're going to work through an initiative and create a proposal and try to influence the organizational culture. Lean into those, look for them, advocate for them, and then do it as a group, because the feedback suggests that is a particularly meaningful way to strengthen the team, to bring the team closer together. And it's something that now that I'm not a company officer, it's something that I regret not having been more intentional about. If I could go back, I wish that I would have done that better. And of course, the benefit of hindsight. But I challenge leaders to really think about, sometimes you look at a drill and you're like, all right, we're just trying to make sure that our I don't know, our hose pulling skills are dialed in. So we're gonna focus on hose pulling. But to recognize that every time you get out there and you work side by side with the people you're leading, not only are you validating those skills and you're making sure that you're ready to perform, but you're also intentionally leading, or you're intentionally creating a more cohesive team. And so there's really a lot of merit in getting out there and doing it, even if you're the only one that realizes that underlying, point or purpose or focus. So that was something that I definitely didn't see coming, but I was pleasantly surprised to see.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, that shared experience, that's something that I hadn't considered either. So I'm glad you brought that up. So when we talk about leadership and vulnerability as part of, in my opinion, a leadership trait, what are some of the norms right now that are very outdated and we need to change those? Is there one that's kind of top of line that's the listener should hear today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cliches in the fire service when I think about leadership from this perspective, and these are things that I probably haven't heard in this organization for quite a while. But I think one of the things, since we brought in several leaders at our highest level from other departments recently, and so it's become kind of our four-letter word is saying, well, historically we've always done it this way, or, that kind of thing. That's like nails on a chalkboard here. I think a leader that says the reason to do something is because I said so is probably a pretty outdated, antiquated way of doing things, especially if you think about the changing, I don't want to harp on generations, but a lot of the people that we're hiring now are younger. They are far more informed than we ever were, especially when we were that age, and they have access to information at their fingertips. Now, we could go on for days about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think generally speaking, it's probably a good thing, but it does have its shadow side. And so a leader really can't get away with just kind of blowing off an informed question. Your followers deserve to understand your why. And if you don't know your why, you're probably better off acknowledging it and trying to figure it out, educate yourself, than trying to fake your way through it by some strongman comment or some cliche phrase. I think if anything, you're going to teach the people that are following you that you're not trustworthy, that they shouldn't believe in you, and they probably should, when they're given an order, take pause, think about it, run it through their own mental model, which arguably, right, will not be as thorough as your own because they lack the years of experience, while they may understand the fundamentals better, or they're more fresh in their mind, even if you were both taught the same thing. But they don't have the benefit of experience. So you really need them to trust you before you give them that order that they're not 100% like in line with, because they need to believe. I think some of the terms that were used, some of the quotes were that I'm confident that my leader has my best interest in mind, right? Not my best interest over the interest of the citizens. That's not what they're saying, but that they aren't just recklessly pointing and barking orders without thought for how that's going to impact me. That was kind of some of those key phrases that I heard, that they care about me, that they've invested in me, that they have my interest in mind. And that only happens when you're willing to be open and converse with people and to admit, to let them be right in some way on some topic. Let them teach you something, right? There's plenty we can learn from the younger generation that we have coming into our departments. I'm confident my department's not the only one that's got, I think we're now just over 50% of our frontline personnel have less than 5 years of experience. And I think that's pretty standard. Our number may actually be a little low. So,
Oh,
right.
wow, that's incredible. Eh? Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that more and more from organizations. City of Tacoma, City of Seattle, they're hiring as fast as they can, and just hoping that the people get through the academy because they've got there's so many positions down, and we're in the wave, right? We're in the cycle. I got hired in the late '90s. My cycle is starting to time out. There was another big wave post recession. That cycle will happen in 30. It's cyclical. It's just the way it is. But now is a particular time where really strong leadership, and I say strong leadership in the way that I mean it, not in the way that traditionalists would view it. It's critically important because you need to impart on these people. You basically need to be creating new leaders because it won't be long before we're gone, and they're not going to have the experience and the breadth of running thousands and thousands and thousands of calls to take your spot unless you are intentional about helping them take your spot.
Yeah, you're bang on. We're definitely at a key critical point in the journey of the fire service. And I was just in Seattle, and I was blown away that I saw billboards saying we're hiring firefighters. Like, wow, Seattle has to promote that they're hiring firefighters. The old days, it was people were just lining up to submit their applications, right? So yeah, amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I know that we've, not to get too off on a rabbit trail, I'm not sure this is even particularly germane to our topic, but several years ago, we lowered our entry requirements. And I know that is a bit of a controversial topic across the country. We removed the EMT requirement. We lowered the minimum age to 18 years old. And at this point, organizationally, we're looking for the best person. We're not looking for the best firefighter. We're not looking for the best EMT. Frankly, there are not a lot of volunteer programs around us anymore. So getting the person in who's got some quote experience is hard anyway. The people we're attracting are people that either have and have always known that they want to be a firefighter, or folks that are coming from other industries, right? We've hired attorneys, we've hired physical therapists, we've hired financial advisors, we've hired folks that have tried other things and are like, that wasn't too bad. Let's give this a try. And so not only are we getting a younger generation that's more informed and is just grown up with, basically an encyclopedia worth of information at their fingertips, but we're also getting people that are coming in who've got some life experience and have got some life experience outside of the life experience that someone like I had, which was next to none because I just started volunteering in high school. That's what I always wanted to do, and that's where I focused. I know that didn't give me a lot of life experience. That gave me a very specific set of experience that seemed relevant at the time, but I would argue that we are a much better service now that we're more diverse. And I'm not just talking about diversity of gender, diversity of race, but diversity of thought. We are much better now than we ever were, in my humble opinion.
Love that. So cool. Lots of good things happen in the fire service. So, Chief, what's one question that I have not asked you that you wish I did ask you? Is there anything there?
I think the question that I would want, I think it would be, I liked the there was a question that was asked in the last podcast I did. It was kind of a challenge, right? A challenge for the firefighter, a challenge for the company officer, a challenge for the executive chief officer. And I think I kind of liked what I said, so I think I'll just repeat it. I would challenge any firefighter who's listening to this, and I hope there are some, to be the follower that you want to follow you when you're a leader. So to think about the way you act, the way you interact, the way you support your leader. I hope you support your leader. The way that you interact with your leader. Try to be the follower that you hope someday will be your follower. To the company officer, I would challenge that leader to basically the heart of this is to look for opportunities to be vulnerable. Start with something small, start with something safe. You don't need to lead with your deepest, darkest secret. I get that for a lot of people that is that they may never share that, and that's okay. I'm not suggesting that you need to even, but there are ways to express vulnerability in an appropriate way that will not only get your crews to trust you more and to be a more cohesive team, but will make you more effective even on the fire ground. And then what I would say to executive chief officers, folks at my level, is I would say, remember where you came from. And when I say that, I don't mean it the way a lot of people would say it, when they would say, he's just forgotten where he came from, right? That's the kind of the negative way to throw that out there. But I would say, remember where you came from. And this might be true for the company officer as well, is to remember how dumb you were when you were brand new. Remember how green you were. Remember how little you actually knew. Remember all the mistakes you made because you had no idea what you were even looking at. Remember how hard it was to get really good. Remember how hard it was to be as good as you are now. And let that motivate you to show grace. Because boy, we all need grace. Discipline is an interesting thing. I spent 10 years as a union president, probably twice that in union leadership. And discipline has always been an interesting concept, right? The idea is to change behavior. And I would argue that if discipline is what's required to change behavior, then you're probably doing it wrong. Because what should change behavior is a genuine connection where you can have a conversation and provide some constructive criticism, and that isn't all someone hears, and they know that you care about them and that you love them and you want the best for them, and they simply continue to move forward and strive for improvement, not only because that's what's expected organizationally, but because they don't want to let you down. Right? So remember where you came from in that positive way, right? Check yourself at the door. Remember how dumb you were, because we were all crazy green and super stupid, right? Let's just be honest with each other.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right?
Totally. 100%.
And let that guide the way that you interact with your junior people, because that will accomplish so much, as opposed to barking an order or dressing them down in front of their peers or whatever old school approach you would use to someone that does something stupid, right? So that would be my closing comments, if you would, and hopefully that resonates with the majority of the listeners here, and that there's something that they can take from our conversation and apply to their own professional lives, maybe even personal lives for that matter. But I hope that the listeners have found this valuable, and keep looking for ways to be vulnerable, and just, I know that this is super cliche, but trust me, it's going to work. You just got to trust me.
And I kind of consider vulnerability like a muscle, like a imaginary muscle. And the more we flex it, the better and stronger we're going to be, demonstrating that leadership trait that I really feel is a character trait, is vulnerability, right?
Totally. I've even heard it referred to as a superpower. Oh, yeah. Right? It has a way of
all the time. Yeah.
Disarming. It just disarms the situation.
It does.
It's completely the opposite of what's expected. Yeah.
So, oh yes, I call it a superpower all the time, because I honestly think if you can do that, it is a superpower, because you can eliminate so much turmoil, conflict. You can help people grow by showing vulnerability. So
absolutely.
So Chief, how can people get in contact with you if you want to learn more about this, or is there any speaking you're doing or workshops or anything that they can dig into a little deeper on this?
Yeah, not yet.
Oh.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how best to spread this message. So far, podcasts are the only place that I've managed to land. I am working on trying to get some articles published. Certainly, you could, if someone was super geeky, you could go to the National Fire Academy library, and you could search my capstone. It's published there, but nowhere else. I was trying to think of what's the best way to contact me. I'm on social media. You could search my name, just throw a middle initial L in there. At least on Facebook. I know Facebook's kind of for old people, but I'm also on Instagram. My handle is Hawkeye, HAWKEYE 1824. And that was something that my fraternity brothers gave me the Hawkeye nickname because I was living at the fire station in college and volunteering. And so the MASH character, Hawkeye Pierce. Anyway, whatever. I'd gladly share my personal cell phone on here, but I don't know if I trust that. So at any rate,
no worries.
Yeah, I would love to talk with anybody about this topic. And if anyone needs some encouragement, even if they want someone to walk alongside them, just to kind of be that support while they kind of do some scary things of expressing vulnerability, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome.
Because I really do think that this is going to be critical to the future and success of the fire service. It's just,
I agree.
It's imperative.
Yep. Well, Chief, it's been an honor. As we know, this is something that's kind of passionate in my world as well. And to build a psychologically safe fire service, I think vulnerability is one of the cornerstones in building that environment. So I want to thank you for kind of being vulnerable and sharing that with the world and sharing the message that we can still be effective leaders. We can still provide orders on the fire ground, but there is time and opportunity for being vulnerable and open and authentic with our personnel, with our families, with ourselves even. And I think that's also another area that we're not very vulnerable at is ourselves. So I think that's another key element that sometimes we have to be a little bit more vulnerable with ourselves. Well, Chief, thank you so much for sharing your message. I really appreciate it, and all the best to you in the future.
Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Hopefully you took a lot of notes on this, and feel free to reach out to Chief if you have more information on vulnerability, you want to dig into it, you want to play with it, you want to learn more about it. Definitely, this is a key person to connect with. So until next time, stay well. That's a wrap.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.